define what is the USMLE. And what I've found is that many students start studying, they get the books recommended by friends and teachers, and they start from page one with a highlighter in their hands, reading the first line and highlighting the second line and highlighting and the third, and they go through methodically page one, page two, page three in every book. But then I stop and say, hold it, what are you studying for? The USMLE. Well, what is the USMLE? So I have to memorize all of these books. That's not the answer. One has to understand. It's like it's like you have a battle plan. You're a general in the army. You've got to know your enemy before you even start to make your plans. I always joke and tell students the Pentagon, the American military apparatus, spends 40% of its budget on intelligence, on one principle. To know the enemy is to defeat the enemy. Not to know the enemy is to be defeated by the enemy. So 40% of its budget is on intelligence. There's a reason why. There's a logic to it. Now, right now, the USMLE, that's the hill that we have to conquer. We have decided that. I've made the first step, the psychological step. So the next thing is to define this enemy. Not just to walk blindly into the battlefield without totally understanding. I hope you're with me so far. So what is the USMLE? Well, sir, the exam that you have to pass in order to have a residency in America. Yes, but that's not what I mean. What does it require from you when you're studying? How does it approach knowledge and the application of knowledge? That's what I'm going after. Well, if someone asks me to define the USMLE, this is what I will say. The USMLE is a three-legged dragon. You know, everybody likes it. Since Harry Potter, everybody likes dragons. It's a three-legged dragon. Now, what are the legs of these dragons? What are the legs of this dragon? Content. Content. That's the facts. 2 + 2 = 4. Context. Why 2 + 2 = 4? Why? And application. And this is where the future of learning and education is. Now, in the past, and what have changed this, by the way, the advent of the internet, Google, internet, have changed the way education is perceived and practiced. And that has filtered down into the medical school and general, all education, medicine being a part of general education. My father's time, all they had to learn was content. And I remember when I was a young man in med school, and I'm sure you studied Davidson for internal medicine. Davidson, you still study Davidson, Cecil's. Now, the good student is the one, or the great student is the one who can memorize every single word in Davidson or Cecil's and can recite it like a parrot. Or the one who memorized every single word in the professor's lecture, including the punctuation mark, and then vomit it faithfully. Da 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 full stop, da 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 full stop, da 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 full stop. That was content. But why? Let me give you an example. Mrs. Jones is 55 years old, comes to the clinic complaining she's not feeling well. Examination shows a woman with abdominal obesity, abdominal stria, emaciated arms and legs. Her blood pressure is elevated. Her blood sugar is elevated. Further examination reveals a protrusion of fatty tissue on her upper back, which the physician labels a buffalo hump. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you are reading this or you hearing this, you're starting to mentally salivate. And you are whispering, I could hear you. Cushing's, Cushing's. From the time you see abdominal obesity, abdominal stria, your mind, Cushing's, Cushing's. And when I said buffalo hump, you vomit. Cushing syndrome. Am I right or wrong? Did you come to that conclusion? Because you made connections. Abdominal striae, abdominal obesity, and the buzzword, buffalo hump, equals Cushing syndrome. 2 plus 2 equals 4. That is content. Content. But medicine and USMLE doesn't stop there. The more important question is, and the USMLE, when it asks that question, is not going to ask most likely A, Cushing syndrome, B, Cushing's disease, C, Conn's syndrome, D, Addison's disease. Absolutely not. There will be no questions in the USMLE like that, because it's a worthless question. It has no value. The patient can Google up today. Patient can Google up the same thing, marks on my abdomen. Doesn't know the word abdominal striae, but marks on my abdomen. My tummy fat increasing, and Google will say you most likely have Cushing syndrome. So I don't need to send a student 6 years to med school to tell me what a patient can Google up in 1 second. Are you seeing where education is changing? And the USMLE is now at the vanguard of that. I have patients coming into the clinic with pages printed from Google with highlights, what Google say they have. And sometimes in the clinic, whilst I'm treating patients, they take their smartphone out and Google up, Doc, what did you say? I said, but Google said this. If Google was a person, sometimes I want to strangle him. But this is the change. And unfortunately, many medical schools are still stuck here and have not moved on. The memorization of facts, which is necessary, but not all. The question now is context. Why? The USMLE will ask. They will tell you the same thing. 55-year-old female presented to the clinic. Examination shows abdominal striae, abdominal obesity, emaciated arms and legs, blood pressure elevated, blood sugar elevated, protrusion of fatty tissue on the upper back, which the physician labels a buffalo hump. And whilst you are in your mind, oh, Cushing's, excited, the last sentence, the physician suspects Cushing syndrome. And you're like, oh my God, that's the answer. And now you go into panic because that's what you've memorized. So the last sentence, the physician suspects Cushing syndrome. And now they ask, which of the following best describe the mechanism by which this patient with suspected Cushing syndrome has developed a buffalo hump? Question is, why does she have a buffalo hump? Now, this is where we are going into context. Now, this is where the USMLE, the heart of the USMLE is. Why is our blood pressure elevated? Why is your blood sugar elevated? Because if I know those things, I can now apply. Other than that, I am walking in the jungle of healthcare without a compass. I don't know where I'm going. So the USMLE now, if someone asks me, I put this box here, 70% of the questions come from this. Some content, mostly context and application. I hope you're still with me because I can't see thing, and I hope that you are still with me and this is truly in your mind. What I want to do is, you are in this room because you have that pioneering spirit. Now I want to sort of hold your mind, shake it and say, yes, here we are going, here's where we are going and how we have to do it. Sort of like your intellectual juices must be flowing. All right. So what is the USMLE? This is it. And like I said, this is where I expect 70%. So in preparing a plan of action for this battle that I need to know these things. Now, if the USMLE consists of about 240 questions, then not all questions are equal. In other words, how are they going to distribute these questions? I need to know that as part of, as a general, how many infantry soldiers the enemy have, how many tanks, how many this and how many that. The more I know about that, the better prepared I am, and the more likely I will win the battle. If I don't know, then I'll be slapped left and right with surprises. And this is where most students, especially IMGs, who prepare for the USMLE the same way they prepare for their medical school exam. And next question I ask, is your medical school exam the same as the USMLE? And I will say no, it can't be. And we can look at the differences. One, the USMLE is a 7-hour exam, one day to test everything you know about basic science for this step one. Whereas medical school have a series of exams. So you're not tested on everything in one day. Second point, the duration of the exam is 7 hours. So you've got to develop mental stamina and ability. Now, I tell you all these things because I want to be upfront with you, because I think you are the pioneer. You are here because you are ready for the challenge. And the third thing is that the USMLE requires me to learn this information in a certain way. Many students come to me and said, all you have to do is memorize first aid. I'm sure everyone in this room has first aid. The first aid becomes the Bible of medical schools. Just memorize first aid and you're fine. Well, that's not true, because first aid is a review of the review. It lists things. It doesn't say why. It assumes you know why. It assumes you've learned the whys. So it's just a book of facts to remind you of the facts. First aid is 80% content. So it is necessary, but not all that is required. And I often joke because, as you know, in India, in many cultures, there are kids that are trained to memorize a whole religious scripture, whether an 8-year-old memorizing the Quran or an 8-year-old memorizing whatever, large parts of the Bhagavad Gita, memorize the whole book. I went to a ceremony once where there was a 7-year-old who memorized the entire Quran, the whole book, went on stage and just recited, just like that. And everybody was cheering and said, oh, well done. And I was saying, why are you cheering? I feel empathy and sadness for this child who was tortured to memorize something that he doesn't understand. Do you think that child can memorize first aid or Davidson if he memorized the entire Quran or the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita? Yes. Would you go to him as your doctor, even though he memorized everything? Spit the words out. So my point is, ladies and gentlemen, how do we approach? And that's what, as part of medical education, that I want to be involved in, is take you from that gap between content, where medical school is, some context, into the world of USMLE, where I'm able to apply the knowledge in the right way. And not only that,